guys, I'm Sai and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation. Here on the channel you can find podcasts, interviews and content on a variety of subjects with ongoing series on mental health in sport, conspiracy theories, serial killers. We also have weekly shows on championship football as well as monthly shows on MMA and films and TV. You can keep up to date with new guests and what's coming up on our Twitter page, which is at acecast_nation, and you can find us on facebook.com/acecastnation, where you will also find our social media exclusive content. We also have all our shows in video format on YouTube, youtube.com/acepodcastnation, and audio downloads on all the sites, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and far too many to list. But they're there. And today's episode is on mental health. In particular, we're going to be looking at addiction and another condition, which I'm very happy to welcome my guest of Living Proof Wear, Mrs. Ginger Malone. Welcome. Ginger Malcolm. I do apologize. I knew I didn't do it. Welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. Cool. So before we get started into the sort of addiction stuff and all that type of thing, I wanted to just ask you a little bit about Living Proof and how that got started, because yeah.
So Living Proof Wear is that's my baby. That is my clothing line, and it's a recovery-based clothing line for substance use disorder and mental health, based on the fact breaking the stigma and being a voice. I have shirts that say "This girl is going to change the world," Stigma Slayer, be a part of the solution in the stigma, neighborhood hope dealer, community life preserver, just different things that say not only who we are, but what we do and what we bring to the table, and that we have a place in this society. I'm always constantly looking at new ideas. I thought recently about a shirt that says "I belong," and the back of it saying mental health awareness.
Okay, cool.
So just shirts that really make us, my slogan is clothes that make a statement and without saying a word, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, and it's just we're living proof that we do recover, that we get better, that we become functioning members of society and contributors to our communities and to the world. And that's really, really big for me. And there's always a hidden thing in each shirt that some people know and some people don't know about. And like for this, there's a campaign across the United States that started in the 80s with the Just Say No and Ronald Reagan and his wife and Nancy Reagan. That was the DARE program, DARE to drug enforcement program with police officers. And we've learned that we can't arrest our way out of the program, out of the process. And so Stigma Slayer is written in the old DARE logo font.
Ah, okay.
So
that's really cool.
There's always something hidden, like in each thing, that means something to me, or really, really makes a statement if you're embedded in this community. So I love it. I love it.
Sorry. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that with the hidden messages and the font and stuff. I do really like that. Obviously, sorry.
You're fine.
Voice is going.
I've got a cough drop in because I'm just like, I don't want to. It's that time of year.
Yeah, too many podcasts in my case. I just constantly talking. So people who know you personally or are familiar with your Living Proof Wear or the work that you do within the addiction field, helping people and for your own issues. Obviously today you're gonna share some other stuff about yourself which you don't speak about as often, and which I think when we spoke on the phone the other night, you were kind of quite emotional about, and you wanted to do it, but you were still kind of nervous about, because it's not something which you speak about. So before we talk about the issues which you've had with addiction, and maybe say if we've got enough time, we'll talk about some of the work you do as well, because I think that's really, really important also. what? So I'll leave it to you to say, in your own words, what you want to what you're going to talk about now. And
So I'm a person in long-term recovery. So what that means for me is that I'm no longer, for 7.5 years, I have no longer been a slave to my addiction. I've no longer been enslaved by my consequences from my addiction. And a lot of addiction, 85% of addiction comes from trauma. And I suffered a lot of early childhood trauma. My mother died. Well, to start with, my brother and sister got into a fight when I was little, about 5 months old, and I was laying on the floor, and my brother threw a pair of tweezers, and they went across my eye. And I had 7 surgeries from then until kindergarten. I became blind in that eye. They removed the lens. I will never see out of that eye. And that's very traumatic. All those surgeries, having my eye, covered all the time as an infant. You can imagine, we put mittens on an infant just to keep them from scratching themselves.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if an infant had a patch or, an eye that was, blocked off or had a bandage on it? And then to keep me from messing with it, they would bind me in sheets. And just the trauma of an infant learning to move and learning their surroundings and being bound like a prisoner is horrific to even think about doing to a child. But to experience it, I can only fathom the path that it set in my mind, and how it affected my mental health and my development. The first 5 years is when your entire personality is developed. So 3 months after that incident, my mother died. And she died at the age of 29 on an operating table from open heart surgery. And I never knew her. And I never really, I used to say things growing up, well, I never really knew her, so it's okay. I don't know what I'm missing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But until I had a child and I realized, I held my daughter for the first time, who's now 21, and said, looked at her and thought, like, I'm her total lifeline. I get to decide if she lives or she dies, if she's healthy, if she has what she needs, if she's loved, if she's taken care of. Everything she needs is wrapped up in me. And imagining what it would be like to see that same consistent person every day for 8 months, and then instantly they're gone. How much more traumatic was that for me? On top of the injury, on top of the eye. And then with the eye, I had the surgeries went all the way. So now I had no mother, I had no sight, and I was suffering from this, injury that I didn't understand, that I didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was the whole time my mind is developing this reality. This is becoming my perception of the world. And it wasn't a safe place for me at that time. And so I had family members. My grandparents stepped up to the plate. I have an aunt, my dad's older sister, who has always loved me like her daughter, been very good to me. And but I say all that to say, I had my first, I was put into a children's home at 13. I had my first suicide attempt at 13. At 15, I had my third attempt, but my first major suicide attempt that led me to, I'd flatlined twice in the back of an ambulance and was brought back. I had overdosed. I was a military kid, so very little stability. And we had moved yet again, and they had given me, I had been on mental health meds and antidepressants and lithium, and misdiagnosed as borderline. I mean, not borderline, but misdiagnosed as bipolar. And I wasn't bipolar, given a bunch of meds that weren't working for me. And I took them all. I took 3 months worth of medicine at one time, and I'm over 200 pills. And my dad found me on the brink of death. And I flatlined twice. They brought me back. They put me into a medically induced coma until they could get all the drugs out of me. And then they sent me away to a mental hospital for 6 months, and feeling as though I only got out because my insurance was running out. Like, how long would they have kept me there? And but realizing in that place that I was not bipolar, but that I had borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
And that's a hell of a diagnosis to share with people. From the minute you say it, people believe that you have different people living in your head, that you have multiple personalities, and that's not what borderline personality disorder is. It is mainly caused from early childhood trauma. And a personality disorder like antisocial personality and narcissism, they all come from your development and perception of what is reality and what you perceive reality to be. And so if your personality is formed in the first 5 years of your life, that's the Erickson's personality chart, says the basis and the borders of your personality are formed in the first 5 years. If your personality is formed in the first 5 years, and it was formed in such a way as mine was, where I was led around by other little children because I would have patches over my eye, or I would have patches over the eye that I could see out of, trying to make this eye stronger. And I got so many infections and 2 cataracts before kindergarten that they finally took the lens out. So being led around by other little children and then moving with the military from place to place. So now I'm not only led around trying to learn environments, the environments that I learn are then yanked out from underneath me too.
Yeah.
So the inability to have stability at all left me, it left me in a place with abandonment. From losing my mother, from losing my eye, from being bound, the deep-seated fear in borderline personality disorder is the fear of abandonment. The fear of not being able to be loved or to love. And so all of these things allow me to understand why that's my diagnosis today. And so what I really, really urge people to do is to educate themselves. And I was blessed with a family that my dad's sister, she educated herself. She read books like Walking on Eggshells, How to Live with Someone with BPD, living with borderline personality disorder. And she grew to understand, and she educated me so much myself about what was going on with me. Mm-hmm. That if I didn't educate myself, I could not become aware of the behaviors that I displayed. The fear would overcome me in such a way that the way that I would act out was primal, destroying relationships because of being afraid to lose somebody, or being afraid that they were going to hurt me. And I needed to hurt them before they hurt me.
Okay.
That's a rough place to be. And then to tell someone and to be judged in such a way that the stigma is horrendous, that they look at you different, that they treat you different, that they act different on your job. And that's why I had to do this, because I'm the stigma slayer. I've made these clothes and I've come out about addiction. I've had incarcerations, I'm a person who stood in front of a judge in shackles and waist chains 7.5 years ago. And today I have 27 letters behind my name. I'm licensed in 2 different states. I'm extremely educated. I'm the Western North Carolina Recovery Outreach Coordinator for the Rally. I sit on the State Summit Recovery Alliance Summit. I have my own clothing line to break the stigma. I'm about to do this big thing with Open Society as a oral history exhibit that'll go across the United States. And I do all these things, but I'm still afraid, and I just cannot be afraid anymore.
Yeah, no, I fully understand. I mean, you've come so far just, since that time where you just mentioned where you were, in chains and stuff like that. But if you don't mind, I'd like to take you back, obviously, where you said you came out of the mental hospital as a teenager. what was what was life like when you first got out? Did you feel like, were you still suicidal when you came out, or was it a case of had you been diagnosed at that point, like when you left the hospital?
I had been diagnosed inside the hospital,
Hmm.
and so it's a mixed breed sort of emotions because for one, I was only 16. I went in 15, came out 16. And I didn't, so my emotions were still, unstable and high and, not,
Yeah.
not great. um, but I felt ashamed and I felt scared. I couldn't tell someone I was in a mental health hospital for 6 months,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and then knowing that they only let me out because my insurance ran out. Like, did they do that because they were taking advantage of the system? Which I didn't understand that at the time, or was I really that crazy and that bad that I needed to be locked up like that? You know what I'm saying? And this was a place it's not a mental hospital like you think, like on TV, because that stuff is not real. It's an adolescent behavioral health center, like where you have a room and you have a roommate and you have to do things. But that was not my first hospitalization. I had my first one at 13 for 30 days. I had another one 3 weeks later for another 30 days. But that was the major one. That was the one where I felt like I would never get out. I would always be victim, and I just didn't think I was that bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wasn't a danger I was a danger to myself, but I wasn't a danger to other people. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wasn't okay with me. And so suicidal, I don't think so, because that's what got me there,
Yeah.
um, but I felt very lost, like they let me go because of my insurance, and why I was so grateful because I had been there for so long and I was so ready to go. Had I really gotten everything I needed? Probably not. Was I really all that better? Not really. The relationship between my family was even more strained. I was so angry, and that relationship hadn't even begun to heal yet. And so I had two more suicide attempts, one at 19, one at 25, one 20 something. But then I got my life together. I got clean. And I didn't start using. Until after high school. But it was like once I did, it opened Pandora's box. That was my vice then. I had an outlet then. But self-harming behavior continued on for years, decades, cutting, just really bad self-harming behavior. So no,
Yeah.
I don't.
So, go on. I was just going to say, so with these mental health shows, which I do, and we focus on a particular mental health disorder or illness. What I try to do is maybe is let my guest say their own experience in their own words, because that's what we want to hear.
Mhm.
Is how it affects you on a day-to-day basis, how it's affected you in the initial diagnosis and symptoms and things like this. But just before we go into that side of it, so I wanted to just explain to people what borderline personality is, from, I don't know, like a not an official point of view, but just like,
Clinical
so
point
from,
of view.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like, from yourhealthymind.org, it says that borderline personality disorder can make it hard for people to feel comfortable in themselves. It can cause problems controlling emotions or impulses. It can cause problems relating to other people. Um, People with BPD can also have high levels of distress or anger. They can also easily take offense at other things that people do or say. And they may struggle with painful thoughts and beliefs about themselves or other people, which can cause distress in work life, family life, and social life. they can often harm themselves. For most people with BPD, it says that symptoms begin during teenage years or as a young adult. And obviously it says about the impact on relationships, which you actually obviously you just touched on, where people they don't feel that they can be loved, or so they often can sabotage relationships before they really can get going, to kind of avoid being hurt by doing the hurting first, if you like. So from your experience, would you agree with most of that? Because I'm always skeptical of like reading off the website
agree with
and stuff.
every single piece of that. But there's another thing that a lot of the internet will talk about, and that even increases the stigma. And so there's something in BPD called splitting, and what it is, when you say that, people think, oh, now we have a Sybil on our hands. You know, she thinks she's Ginger and Monica and Veronica and Vicky and Nikki, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's got all these, and that's not but just that terminology insinuates that. And so, but what splitting is black and white. I love you, get the hell out. Don't leave me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's that black and white. And I live in that area. Like, I have to take yoga, and I've had to learn how to try to meditate to find a gray space for me. You know, everything is black and white. It's like, even in this recovery process. So it's like, for me, I'm either all the way in or I'm all the way out. And it's like, if you tell me one thing, like my boss can tell me, and I love what I do, and I work with someone who is accommodating and sympathetic and understands me, and I'm so grateful for that. But I've been in places and in jobs where, you know, and worked in mental health, where people are like, oh, you're the poster child for BPD, you're so high functioning and stuff like that. But let me have a bad day, and it's like, oh, well, you know she's borderline, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I can't stand that. But the splitting, and when you just say that on the internet, people read it and they just don't understand. And so I was trying to give the analogy of like, so I was in my addiction, and I was balls to the wall in my addiction, caught charges, faced incarcerations, like, you know, was incarcerated, you know, spent multiple times in jail, and had consequences and legal consequences. And like, then when I got to the recovery side, like the light switch went off and I went all the way into recovery. So like, I do all this stuff in recovery. I've got all this. So you see what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
I'm all the way in or I'm all the way out. And it's like, someone will tell me something and they're like I've even noticed it, like in my work, like, well, maybe you don't need to interact with that person right now because they're you know, they're in a different space, you know, with their recovery or something like that. Well, if someone says that to me, well, then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I won't ever speak to them again. I'll be civil, but I won't speak to them again.
Yeah.
And they're not saying like, Ginger, you don't have to back off that far. Just, you know, give them some space. But for me, it's like, all the way in, all the way out, you know,
Yeah.
all or nothing. Yeah. And so that's where that splitting is. It's where you split between, there's no common ground, you know.
There's nothing in the middle.
You split between good, bad, yes, no, and that's it. And so I think that's the only thing I would say about what the internet says, is just that terminology makes it so fearful for people, you know, to try to even understand. And they can't understand how because people that know me would never know that, like, I'm not always happy. I mean, people aren't always happy. People know that, but they would not ever know just how dark it gets for me, how deep the depression gets for me, how dark the depression gets for me, how angry I get, how mean I can be to people I love. People would never imagine that about me, because I'm, you know, up here, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm helping this one, I'm helping that one. And so it's just really, this is why I had to come out and say, look, this is a lot of hard work. And it's not just hard work for me to stay in recovery. It's hard work for me just to come to work every day. just to be consistent. Like it talks in there about relationships. It's hard for people with BPD to keep jobs. They have to stay constantly stimulated. They get used to the mundane, and it gets uncomfortable for them. They have to, and so I have to reel those things in when I see things happening, and I have to talk myself down off that ledge. Like, Ginger, this isn't about you. They're not upset with you. They don't want to fire you, because if I think that, then I'll go show out and I'll just take care of it before they do,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You can't do that.
Like on that side of it, from a day-to-day point of view and the impact that BPD has on you, like daily, what would you say is the most common sort of impact or issue which you experience, whether it's now or when you were younger, just from a day, like almost kind of every day you have to deal with that sort of impact?
The negative self-talk. Something happen in the office and be like, well, do they think that I did it, or that's my fault, or are they upset with me? The constant negative self-talk, like I'm to blame, I'm the problem. And then not only, because in mental health, I've learned, especially, and I was abused. So on top of everything I had already been through, my dad married two women who were extremely, extremely abusive, put us out in the cold all day with a pack of crackers, like very, very mentally and emotionally and physically abused on top of all of this. And so what I found is that when you're treated that way, those thoughts and those voices or those things that are said to you as a child, they become your own voice as you get older. So it's, you tell yourself those things, it's very hard to distinguish between if this is real for me, if this is really are they really mad at me? Are they really, you know what I mean? Or is this just me in this self-defeat, in this self-sabotage? And then the sickness behind that is that like in addiction, is total self-centeredness, and so I'm still keeping the focus on me. So it's like all the underlying layers of mental health, like I can't, I have to stop the self-talk, but then I have to get to the root of that. Like, why am I so convinced that everybody's so worried about me? Like I'm not that damn important. You know what I mean? I mean, and that's reality. People just don't sit around and talk about me all day. So, and that's that core stuff, that core self-esteem stuff, that happens as a child. That's always there, lingering every single day. And then the fear of telling people. When you work in the field, I've worked in the field, and even where I am now, I've watched people judge individuals when they find out they have a borderline personality disorder. And then I sit back and I'm thinking, if they only knew. Mm-hmm. You're sitting here, you're saying all this stuff about them. If you only knew. Look how high functioning I am. Look how much, I do some things that might throw some signs, but you wouldn't think that because you've got this stigma so strong on this disorder. And I hear them, in the backgrounds talking about that individual and how they can't deal with it, and it's so hard, and blah, blah, and they're so this and they're so that, and I'm just sitting there the whole time thinking, if you only knew.
Yeah, that must be really difficult to not say something as well. Just before we go on to,
so afraid, the fear.
Yeah, absolutely, because you
what are they going to think about me if they're saying that about them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just before we go on to the kind of stigma side of it, just what you were saying about the splitting and about the negative thoughts, like on a daily basis, that must be really, really emotionally draining to go from like you said, like the splitting from one extreme to the other without any sort of middle ground, but also then have that constant kind of negativity in your mind where you're thinking, is there a problem with my job? Is there, do they think it's my fault? Have I done this or have I done that? So that's going to take a toll, even if you kind of keep it to yourself, and it's just within your own mind, and you're thinking like I overthink everything from my own issues, and I find that exhausting. So I can only imagine how exhausting you must find that on like a daily basis, having to kind of you must spend a lot of time in your head talking yourself down or talking yourself around to for it to not have an impact, on your daily life in work or with your relationships and stuff like that, which I'm sure, there's points where it does, but just from an emotional point of view, it must be very, very difficult.
Oh, it's exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. And then it takes a toll on my physical. So it causes me to emotionally eat, and which has led me to borderline diabetes diagnosis. It's caused me, they thought I was having a heart attack a couple of months ago, put me in the hospital. My heart was so right. It's caused an elevated heart, tachycardia, elevated heart rhythm. And now my triglyceride, because of the way I've been eating, my triglycerides were up, my sugar was up, and then my whole trapezoid muscles, the stress had gotten so bad that they had locked in on my neck and literally straightened my neck out. I had no curve in my spine, and just the stress. And so I've had to implement yoga. I've had to go to a weight loss doctor. I've had to bite the bullet and take, cholesterol medicine, and try to starting to learn how to control this stuff through diet and exercise, so not just will self-care not take you there, not doing self-care, but the stress of what I do on top of what I deal with every day, just being in my head, and trying to keep it straight. It's exhausting.
A lot of people who I speak to about like mental health and addiction and stuff, they always or they regularly, I would say 95% of the people who I've spoken to about mental health or addiction or both say that they use yoga or meditation in their recovery or in their day-to-day sort of management of their mental health, just their illness or their disorder, just to keep themselves sort of, level and going about their daily routine.
Well, it is no lie that the best thing in the world for depression and mental illness is exercise and the sun. I mean, the sun and exercise. And see, I live in the mountains. And so now this is when seasonal depression sets in. It gets cold, it snows, there's no sun, and I moved here 2 years ago, and so now I've had to self-regulate myself in that area too. But I have a faith-based system too. I mean, I believe in God and Jesus Christ, and that's my outlet. That's what I'm joyful for. Like, that's what keeps me sane. That's what keeps me going, is to have a purpose and a reason to be of service to other people, but it does take a toll on me. And sometimes I think my own mental health takes a toll on me worse than other people's problems.
I've read. So, obviously, you're the stigma slayer, as it were. So,
yeah.
What are some of the biggest like stigmas do you think that you come across with BPD?
Though, like I told you, people think you have multiple personalities. If you say you have BPD, they think you have multiple personalities. They think that there is no cure. They think that there is no solution, that you won't get better, that you'll always be that way, that no one can help you. I've seen that stigma placed on individuals in our care, in my care, that there can't be help. And the biggest help, and it's not a medicated thing. Personality disorders have to be treated with behavioral therapy. Like, there's no way around it. It's your personalities have produced a behavior, and your behavior has produced, an action, a coping mechanism, And so those things have to be broken. You have to change your whole way of thinking and your whole way of responding and reacting and processing. you have to learn to process, to slow down long enough to process information and sift through it. It's like it's almost like you have to take your thoughts and put them in a sand sifter, like at the beach, and keep what's good and let the rest of it just go.
Yeah.
And you really have to be able to do that. And you don't learn those tools and you don't learn those things without some kind of therapeutic value. So the biggest stigma is that people believe that you have multiple personalities and that you're absolutely insane, crazy, and you cannot be helped and you will not get better.
Yeah, I mentioned to you the other day, I did a show on DID, and I recently did a show on schizophrenia, which is coming out today, actually. And then both the gentleman who I spoke to with schizophrenia and the show I did on DID, they both said the same thing about films and TV, is that everyone you see on a film or a TV who's got schizophrenia or multiple personalities disorder, they're violent, they're aggressive, they're serial killers, they harm people. So whenever they have to tell, someone, whether it's someone in work or someone they've just met, or like not just met, but like a new relationship, quite often the reaction, that's the first thing people think of, is what they see in a film or a TV, which is so damaging, and it's something which because I don't suffer with schizophrenia or DID, I'd never thought of that. That's all that people who just see those things on films and TV, that's all that they see, which I found quite interesting. But I also found really sad and upsetting that those people are having to deal with their illnesses each day and the difficulties which they bring for them. And then when you do tell someone and you like confident enough or you're brave enough to share it with someone, you feel like you know them well enough, they could back off, or they could even not want to be your friend anymore or be in a relationship with you anymore because of that negative connotation straight away. So I looked up some of the most common myths about BPD. So I was just going to go through them, and then you can kind of respond to them, if that's okay. So the first one was that it was non-treatable, which you just touched on. What is the treatment for BPD generally?
One of the best is DBT.
Okay, so
Dialectical behavioral therapy. I can't say that word right, but
yeah.
DBT. But step work is a lot like DBT. It's a lot of journaling. It's a lot of processing. It's processing it with another person, that can identify your patterns in your life and the things that you do. That's a really big deal. And you need that insight, Yeah.
So then another one was that all people of BPD are victims of child abuse, which is not true.
That's true.
No.
Well, one of the biggest myths, I think, is that people with BPD can't love, like that we have no emotion.
Yeah.
That's not true.
But would it, like, obviously I don't know, but like, wouldn't it be that it's the opposite in that you've got almost too much emotion? Would that be true?
You do have too much emotion, but that emotion can also be rage and anger. So because that's displayed a lot as a protective measure, then an internal protective measure, then people feel that way, that you have no emotional bias for love, so I grew up without a mother and in abuse. And the love that I have for my children is, just undescribable. The relationship, the bonds that we have, it's just, I don't know where it came from. The ability to love them that way without ever feeling that kind of love. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We absolutely have the ability to love, I'm married, I have a successful relationship, and it's hard at times, and I'm hard to live with, but I have someone that genuinely loves me, for who I am. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. I have family members that can't stand me because they don't understand it, and family members who have stood by me and advocated and fought for me tooth and nail, because they didn't understand it, but they took the time to get to understand it.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing. And I think mental health really gets the raw end of the deal. It's like when the world has changed so much, the violence, it's just horrible, the things that have happened, the brutal attacks, and like even just the thing that happened in Mexico with the children, and the attacks, and the violence and the bombings and all that stuff. And we always want to look at people. What is the first thing people say? Oh, something must be wrong with him. Must be crazy. Some people are just inherently evil. They're raised in a life that their only response is that they've been conditioned to be that way. You know what I mean? And they don't even understand that there is something wrong with them, and that that's not their norm. And I'm not saying that makes it, I'm just saying, why is it always that we constantly, if something doesn't click right, oh, they got to be mentally ill, they got to be mentally sick, they got to be crazy. And the biggest thing with me in Stigma Slayer is the language that we use, the messaging. I don't want to be called an addict anymore. That has a negative connotation, and I speak death over myself every time I do that. I'm a person who struggles with substance use disorder, who struggled. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I don't want to be crazy. The word crazy, we say crazy flies out of our mouth probably 100 times a day. Oh, that's crazy. Well, crazy is what is it? Who's the guy? Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
That's crazy to people. People, like on TV, psychotic, unstable. That's crazy. I don't want to be called crazy. I can't stand for people to say that to me. Oh, you're crazy. I don't want to hear that, because now I'm an addict and I'm crazy. No, that's not.
You shouldn't have to either. And at the end of the day, like you say, there's all these sort of people doing, evil things all around the world and various different things. But there's also millions of people who've got a variety of, a wide range of mental illnesses and disorders around the world who are not doing, they're not doing evil things. They're not just hurting people. They're not.
Yeah. Just like how we focus on substance use disorder. It's like the one plane that crashes. So substance use disorder, we have heard about this opioid crisis for a decade now, and all these people and I'm tired of burying people. I'm tired of people dying from addiction. But there's also millions and millions of people who successfully took opioids for pain management and have never abused them. Yeah. And have never, you've got 70-year-old people who have been on pain meds for 20 years for hip and back that are now on Suboxone, that are now on alternatives to opioids because the doctors have stopped prescribing them, and not that I'm a fan of it at all, because that's definitely not true. But it's the fact that we don't hear anything about all of that.
Yeah, you're right. So you mentioned 7.5 years ago that you were sort of kind of in chains, and you were in trouble. Yeah. So you're in recovery now, and you've had a battle with addiction. So tell me a bit about that and how it got started and stuff.
So I gave you the past story about all of the abuse and things that happened as a child. I never used. I drank some, I experimented some with alcohol when I was younger, but quickly got away from it because I was younger, didn't have access to it, and it made me so sick. But from the very first time I ever drank, I drank to get drunk. that addictive behavior set in long before the addiction did. And then I got out of high school and I started smoking marijuana. I met my first husband who smoked marijuana and sold marijuana. Really became enticed by that. And then I got pregnant. I had children. I didn't smoke. I didn't do anything. They got a little bit older. And my husband at the time got strung out on methamphetamines.
Okay.
And he finally, I said, I want to see what you're doing. And so I used with him, and that was it. It was over. From the first time I used, I lost weight. I had just, I started looking better. I thought I was losing weight. I looked better. I was doing better. And then I started selling, and then it cost me my marriage. It destroyed my marriage. And then I started selling drugs and caught charges. And lots of time incarcerated and probation, violated my probation several times. And then I stood in front of a judge 11 years ago about to get shipped off for 3 years to prison. And he gave me the chance to go to treatment, or to go to a treatment, but it was faith-based. It was very religious. There was church on the property. You went 13 times a week. For 6 months, all I went to was work in church. I was there for a year, and I got off of methamphetamines. I went home and I never did meth again, but I started casually drinking and realized that I had substituted. In 5 years, I was in the same place I was with the meth. Jails, death, or jails, institutions of death. And so I was still on probation from my original drug sentence, and I was on non-report, and I'd had 2 DUIs in 30 days, multiple arrests. And my probation officers found out about it, and they brought me in, and they were going to send me to prison for 24 months. I went back before the same judge, and it's a powerful, powerful story. Like I said, I was in shackles and waist change, and my family, my aunt came and advocated. During this time between treatments, my father died from cancer.
Right.
And never went back to meth, but I think that kind of sent my drinking over the edge too. And so I was in jail, and I'd done 37 days, and I had a job, and my job came and advocated for me, and the recovery place that I had a chance, the sober living place I had a chance to go to, came and advocated for me in the courtroom. And the probation officer and the DA looked at me, and he said, "You're going to jail. You're going to prison today, little girl. You're going to prison." And I got up there and I testified, and they testified for me, and the judge looked at the recommendation and handed it back to the district attorney and said, "The state will do this woman no good. Let her go home. Let her get her life together. Let her go back to work." And that's what I did. I went home. I was forced into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. And I walked into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous on April 12th of 2012 with 37 days clean. And a couple of months into my treatment, into that sober living place, and I lost everything when I got clean. Like, I lost the house, I lost my license, I lost the job, I lost the boyfriend. I caught my boyfriend in the bed with another girl while I was on pass one weekend. Like, I lost everything when I got clean. And what I know today is, had I not have been in a controlled environment like I was, I never would have stayed clean through it. Never would have stayed clean through that. So I got through that, and then I got pregnant in my first year of recovery. And I celebrated my first year on March 6th, 2013, and I gave birth to my daughter on April 12th, 2013. A year to the day that I walked into the rooms in Narcotics Anonymous, I gave birth to my daughter.
Wow.
And and she saved me, because her daughter was, her father was from the rooms. And mind you, I was divorced now, and her father was from the rooms, and he had relapsed, and he was gone to prison. And I knew I couldn't get a job. I was a 2-time convicted felon. I couldn't deliver pizzas. I couldn't work at Waffle House. I couldn't drive for anyone. There was nothing I could do to support her. I couldn't find a good job because of my record. and I was educated. I was, I had been a pharmacy tech before. I had gone to school to be a paramedic, and I couldn't do anything because of my record. And so I knew I had to find a way. And so someone offered this school. There was a school in Georgia where I could fast track through the education portion of the substance abuse to be a substance abuse professional. And she said, you need to come on and go. And I was like, I don't know. And the Holy Spirit just said, you're going to do what I've got for you, or you're going to smack me in the face with it one more time. And so I just said, okay, I surrender. And I went to school. I got done with school in about 8 months. I took the test for the first time. I passed the first time. I became a counselor. I started working in Georgia and tying my credentials to sober living houses. I started building programs. I started doing a lot of work there. And then I ended up, my daughter graduated from high school and went to college there in Georgia. And I had a chance to, and now mind you, both my parents were gone and my little girl didn't have any grandparents, and my dad's sister lived in North Carolina. So we moved to North Carolina to be closer to family, where I eventually met my husband that I have now and married him. And he's a wonderful father to her and a great provider and good to us, and also in recovery. And so it's just been a whirlwind from where I was to where I am now. I'm licensed as a clinician in Georgia and in North Carolina. I'm the director of admissions for Next Step Recovery in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's only men transitional therapeutic sober living with intensive outpatient. And we take people from the UK. We take people from out of the country. And it's a beautiful program. And I get to speak and I get to do all this stuff, and I advocate in the courtroom. So I've advocated in the same courtroom I was prosecuted in won the recovery. So I advocate for recovery rather than incarceration, for people to be able to go into recovery, and I find them places to go, and I get them into a place and all that stuff if the judges will let them go. And I haven't lost yet. And I've won, like I said, I've won in the same courtrooms I was prosecuted in.
That must be amazing. It must be so fulfilling, but it must also be like a reminder as well to you of where things could have gone and where things could have ended up,
and where they still can go.
If
I don't stay on the path. Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing that you're not just in recovery yourself, and you've got a job, and you're living with BPD, and you're helping other people as well with mental health issues, but also you're helping other people help turn their lives around and do the same thing. And I think that deserves a tremendous amount of credit, because
thank you.
Not everybody would be able to do that with everything which you've been through, and still be, able to do everything which you've done. So I do think you deserve an amazing amount of credit. I wish I had a little bit more time to speak to you, but I really don't. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But
we'll talk again. We'll do this again. The joy is
will.
seeing other people get better, and people that struggle with mental health and with substance use disorder, either one, being able to have what they consider a normal life. Not what I consider a normal life might not be what they consider normal. They might not want to be in a big fancy apartment. They might not want to be in the city. So learning how to find out what their satisfaction is, what their norm is, that's the hit right there. And then supporting them through that, Yeah,
you're right. And it's everything. What people hope to achieve is different, isn't it? It's different for everybody. Ginger, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story with me. I know it's difficult and it can be emotional to kind of talk about stuff, especially if you haven't talked about it, a lot.
And the bright side is, the older you get, the better BPD gets. You learn to cope with it. And that is a known fact. The older you get, the more it subsides.
That's good. And so the reason I do all these mental health shows, these shows on addiction, is because I want people to realize that there are other people going through the same things as they are, and realize that they're not on their own, and if they are struggling themselves, they can get help and they can get through. That's the aim. My DMs are always open if people need any advice, or not that I'm any sort of medical medical professional, but I'll certainly be able to send you somewhere where you can, or I'll just have a chat.
And mine are too. So Ginger Stream the Dream Malcolm on Facebook, Living Proofware on Facebook, and livingproof.com.
Cool. And what's your Twitter handle for Living Proof?
I think it's at G Stream the Dream, right?
Yeah, I think that's it.
G Stream the Dream. That's what it is.
Cool, guys. And definitely check out livingproofwear.com for some awesome designs and clothing, and support Ginger, because it's a real cool site and I like it a lot. Guys, you can find me on Twitter at acecast_nation, facebook.com/acecastnation. All our other mental health shows and all our many other podcasts are on various subjects and guests. Can be watched at youtube.com/acepodcastnation, and audio download at all the usual podcasting apps, including iHeartRadio, Apple Pods, Spotify, Google Pods, and more. Thanks, Ginger, again for joining me.
Thank you.
And guys, remember, it's never too late to talk. It's never too late to get help. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. You'd be great. You're amazing. Bye-bye.
Thank you.